Okay, so hello all and welcome to the Diversity Matters event. I would like to introduce this session's speaker, Isaac Eloi, who will be talking about coming into yourself and claiming what you deserve while Black, LGBTQ and disabled. Welcome, Isaac, and take over.
Hello, Robert. Thank you so much for the introduction. It's quite interesting. When I was first asked to do this talk by the university, I initially didn't know what I would say. I'm quite proud to do the work, obviously, that I do with the Black Men in Law Network. But initially, I was a bit confused as to why people wanted me to speak specifically. After all, I'm just myself. And then afterwards, I had to sit and think for several days, and I realized that a lot has happened in my life to get me to this point effectively. So for myself, I was born and raised in Bradford in West Yorkshire, and then my family came from Dominica to the UK. And they migrated to England in the 1950s, and they were part of the Windrush generation. I'm incredibly proud of them and their achievements. I've been fortunate enough to visit my grandparents' villages on 2 separate occasions in my life. And it's only when I'm there and I sit and think about those experiences, one of those which I experienced in the Christmas just gone, that I realize how much of a seismic shift my current success in life is compared to that which was possible for my grandparents, 60 or so years ago. When my grandparents moved to this country from their home in the heart of the Caribbean Sea, because of the lack of anti-discrimination laws which existed at the time, and the poor housing stock in the aftermath of the Second World War, they could barely afford to rent a room. While they would have wanted to have houses like they had in the Caribbean, which were detached, everyone having their own separate space, people simply would not give them to them because they were Black. Times were bleak and things were hard. In time, they persevered and they were able to acquire housing. And they banded together. They formed a community of other migrant communities. And from that community came people like my parents. The community in the city in which I was born was very tight-knit and it was very close. There wasn't a time when I was younger where I could walk through the home in my hometown centre and not see an elder. And it made me think about, when they were my age, in the evenings, for example, they would see the setting sun slowly falling into the sea every evening. And unfortunately, I had to cope with grey skies. But my education experience was tricky. I remember thinking back, I remember some teachers on non-uniform days looking at like the back of my t-shirts, and they want to see where I managed to acquire particular clothes from. And the reason they did that is because people couldn't believe that you could have Black children who would be well dressed or relatively presentable. And that was quite funny to me, because from a Caribbean perspective, being presentable and being, well dressed and well presented is a core part of the cultural experience which I was raised with having. I remember people having difficulties with the fact that I liked school, I was intelligent, and I loved reading and I loved learning things. And as far as they were concerned, I shouldn't have been like that as a person. And then, looking at my time at secondary school, it was tricky. It was an all-boys school and there were a handful of Black boys. And I distinctly remember in year 7 that my grades were mixed up with another Black students. And it was quite strange in terms of the reports people were giving about me. I was like, this doesn't sound like me as a person at all. And I raised it to my parents. I said, it's really strange. And people say I'm bad at things like English and Spanish. And it's strange because I'm very good at those subjects and I enjoy them. And I get on well with the teachers I have. And my parents said they've mixed them up with someone else. So you're going to have to effectively challenge it. And so I did. And it became difficult because teachers didn't want to acknowledge the error that had been made which obviously was a systemic error. And people didn't want to acknowledge it. And I remember teachers in particular saying to me, some teachers said, even if it's not the grade, even if it's the grade you received and you shouldn't have received it, you were still given it anyway. And even if you think you need to have that grade changed, it shouldn't be changed anyway because it's what you deserve. And it created a real sense of pain and anger in me, and realizing that my life was quite different to that of a lot of my peers. I remember similar things happening with the isolation unit. And the isolation unit was overpopulated with Black boys. because the school said that it would give them a stronger sense of social and educational performance and a better environment for them to work in, when in reality all it did was isolate them. It created furor among parents, as you'd expect. Parents deal with things like this all the time. Black students deal with situations like this all the time. It's normal for people like me. We have these experiences all the time, and they may shock people, but that's our experience and the experiences of our parents in this educational system. My experience in the legal profession has been different. In many occasions, I have been the only black person in the room. And many times I've also been the only black man in the room. Being LGBT as well, my experiences are different to those of my non-black counterparts. Sometimes it's difficult for me to reconcile myself with that fact, but the things that I experience that they just don't experience. Interestingly enough for myself, I only acknowledged and realized that I had 2 disabilities in the middle of my training contract. I found that out rather randomly. I was in my second seat, and what happened is my supervisors asked me why I worked in a particular manner, and I didn't understand what they were talking about. I just thought this is how everybody works. And then I started to realize that maybe I operate differently to other people. And so in time, I ended up having doing my own research and wondering what they were talking about and things they were raising. And I looked at what they were talking about and realized that actually it might be the case I have dyspraxia. Didn't think about it. And so I raised it to my supervising partners, and I raised it to the HR team, and in time I ended up being diagnosed with dyspraxia. I also ended up getting diagnosed with dyslexia. Sometimes they're similar and have, slightly overlapping symptoms, so to speak. And then I started to realize how that was going to impact my life and how I had to navigate and move around in different spaces. And for people, I want you to remember that you don't have to internalize, and you shouldn't internalize things that are around you, because there are a lot of people who, while you deserve to be here, believe you shouldn't. It's things like the barely palatable, imperceptible energy that you're not wanted, the comments that appear inconspicuous to someone else, but then manifest a clearer meaning to you and intent to you and your community. It's the waxing and the waning standards which are harshly applied on your head and are touted as learning experiences for your peers instead. There'll be days and sometimes even years when you experience life in a way that none of your peers can even begin to comprehend, and it will be incumbent upon you to dissociate from the political and material realities of the day, in which your people are systematically and systemically oppressed in multiple ways. Because when you carry that hurt, pain and anger constantly, especially in the workplace, it will leave it very hard for you to cope. You have to let every day become new while never forgetting the struggle of your forebears who've led you to become the person that you are. And so I want to leave you with my top 10 tips which have served me over the last 5 years in the legal profession. Strive for excellence in everything you do. The standard expected of you, especially in that profession, is an enhanced one. And while you should have it, you won't be granted the same grace as others to fall short of the standard. Start as you mean to go on. Learn from your mistakes. It seems self-explanatory, but it's easy enough not to do when the world is moving around you at 1,000 miles an hour. Critique yourself positively and just keep learning. Never stop learning. Prepare for every reasonable eventuality. It's a crucial skill to learn, because while it prepares you for unexpected events, which are par for the course in legal services, it also shows that you can handle things when they go wrong, and something always will go wrong. Your preparation will reduce your stress levels in the heat of the moment. Read around your subject. Long gone are the days in GCSE times where you were taught the information that you needed to know, and all you needed to do was memorize that. You have to show that you had the aptitude and the knowledge to engage with the work effectively. Remember that there are certain traps that you have to navigate. Network your socks off. Your network is your net worth, especially in times of crisis. Engage with your peers and practitioners and take an interest in what they're doing and support them where you can. Reach out to people and give back. Industries are all about people, and one day, you will realize that who you know and what they think about you will matter to you deeply. Take your loved ones on the journey with you. It can be easy to think that people close to you understand how these industries work, but they really don't. Explain the systems and processes to them so that they can help and support you along the way. Build your support network. You need help and support at every stage in life. And it's important to have people around you who love and care about you for who you are, and that will always support you in the difficulties that you'll face in this life. Reach out to people when you need help. You're only human, and at times you need more help than you think. If you sometimes struggle with things, it's important to ask someone for help, because if you don't ask for help, you effectively don't get. Don't be afraid to raise concerns if they happen to you. It's important to keep the discourse that we've seen this year going, and making sure that if something isn't right, that you tell people. And my last tip is, remember that this is all yours for the taking. Ignore the little voice in your head that tells you that you can't do things, because you absolutely can. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Isaac. Just before I close, is there any questions? If anyone has any questions, please pop them in the chat box.
From Jenny.
There is one.
Yes. So how would I recommend to approach an employer about a possible learning disability? You're afraid it will go against you. Yes, I was myself. What you have to do is you have to make sure that, and understand as well, that from a legal perspective, effectively, if you don't tell someone about a problem, they cannot, one, solve it. And effectively, from an employment perspective as well, you also, you can't highlight that you've not been given any kind of assistance, or, you know, that something's happened to you, if, for example, it's a particular type of discrimination. So it's important that you explain the particular symptoms that you think you have of a condition, and that, you know, I've looked at the NHS website as an example, or specific learning disability specific websites, and, you know, making sure that if these come up when you're at work, that it's helpful for them to support you in that, because it helps them comply with their legal obligations to support you as a disability, as a disabled individual.
Thank you. And then there's one more question here. So how would you suggest networking to full potential in a post-COVID world?
Yes, and also one of the comments I've just seen as well, it's correct. You don't have to disclose until you're given an offer of employment. So that's, of course, completely true and correct. In terms of networking to your full potential in a post-COVID world, everyone is now on the internet, which is fantastic. It was much harder before to network with people. Sometimes they wouldn't see things on LinkedIn. Everyone is on the internet now. It's the best time, you know, ever to network with people. They're always looking at LinkedIn. People are always looking at social media. Make sure you reach out to people, like their comments, have it, you know, have conversations with people. They're more likely to have conversations with you either in Zoom events or things like that now, because people have more time. So obviously, you know, make sure you do the research and ask people the right kinds of questions that you need to ask them. But people will be grateful to give you their time. So don't worry. It's easy to kind of go about doing that.
Thank you very much, Isaac. I think that's it. So that marks the end of the session. Our next speakers are Bhavita Ray and Shanika Varga Haynes. To join the talk, please exit the session and join the live sessions tab on the homepage or the sessions tab. And once again, thank you very much, Isaac.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.